Hey there, it's Olivia's Vane here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today I'm here to give you a recent reads video. I'm going to talk about 10 books that I've recently read, and I'll leave content warnings for each of these books in the description box down below. And I'm going to try and split this by genre, and let's see how that goes. So without further ado, let's get right down to the books that I have read recently. First, I'm going to start with some black literary fiction that I've picked up, and I'm going to start with Mr. Loverman by Bernardine Evaristo. So I make it no secret of mine that I did not really like Girl, Woman, Other, and I felt quite underwhelmed by it. But when Chatty from the Mad Book Chatterer gave me this book from their on haul, I decided to give it a go and see if I liked this one better, because everybody says her other books are better than Girl, Woman, Other. And everybody was right. I really enjoyed reading this one, and it was absolutely just brilliant. So this one follows a 70-ish-year-old black man who lives in the UK. He's married to his wife and he's very unhappy about it because he has a lover who is his best friend. He's black, he's gay, he's closeted, and he's from the island of Antigua as well. And you just kind of follow him as he decides that it's time for him to kind of live his life and be with his partner. And he may be too old to find happiness, but he's going to do his very best to do so. However, he's also not a very likable character. He treats his wife quite badly, he's a mess, he's not really there for his kids. He's not the best man, and yet even though he was an unlikable character, the more you get to know him, the more you read this book, the more I really liked who he was, because even though he was a mess in so many different ways, in some core elements of himself, he did love and care about the people around him and try to do his best by them. And you can see how being like closeted for all of his life kind of ate away at some parts of him that could have made him a better man if they'd managed to stick around and stay. I think a lot of these characters have unlikable traits. I'm not going to say they are unlikable like he is, but they have traits about themselves that are not that good and not that bad. And Bernardine Evaristo kind of expertly takes you through each and every single one of those characters in relation to him and what their relationship with him is like. But you also get to see how they've come to be that way. You get to see them from different perspectives. And I sometimes struggle with these character-driven books where it feels like nothing is happening in terms of plot. But this one was a really integral character-driven plot where he is learning how to be himself, and you can see him really have to push back against a lot of internalized homophobia that also especially comes along with like black Christian culture and growing up in that environment. She did such a good job of it being an elderly character. In some ways he's like, I don't understand the youth, I don't understand why they do things this way, and poke fun at them, but at the same time you can see that even though he is old, even though he is elderly, he still cares about some of the things that his kids care about. He still wants to feel hip and young and connected, and I liked that duality. I liked how it delved into that and unpicked it, because I do think sometimes we get this view that elderly people can't change, and books like this show us that they really can. It doesn't ignore the fact that he has islander cultural history, and that is tied into the story about how he sees himself and how he fits into the world as a black man in Britain at this current time, and how he's fought to be where he is. It also does a very good job of being written in a patois feeling adjacent to Queen's English language. So it's got that blend of like patois and British English, and I like how even in the language in this book he code switches. When he talks about certain subjects, you can see him falling more into the Queen's English, but also he speaks with the patois accent, he kind of talks in patois, and you can see that navigated through the writing itself. And I thought that was just such a fantastic blend and such a fantastic way to drive home a lot of the complexities that this book touches on. It talks about class, it talks about race, but mostly it talks about queerness and love and the complicated relationships and how we end up in these complicated relationships sometimes. I really like this, and I'm now very on board with reading more of Bernardine Evaristo's works. After really enjoying Stay With Me at the end of last year, I decided to continue on and pick up A Spell of Good Things by Ayobami Adebayo, and it was just okay. I don't think this one hit near as much as Stay With Me did. So in this one we're following two characters. One of them is Wariola, and she is young, she's black, and she's just about to take things on the next step with her boyfriend, and she kind of lives in the higher end of Nigeria, so she's integrated into classism, she's integrated into the political battles that are going on in the time that she is living. And she also is someone who's training to be a doctor, and she just wants to be able to do that while living her life. And then you've also got Eniola, who is a schoolboy, and his father has lost his job. They're really struggling for money, and he's quite young and angry that he's not getting the school and education that he thinks he deserves. And so you've got these two very separate and distinct perspectives living in very different kinds of Nigeria, where the poverty versus the richness, the political situation is just driving their lives very far apart. And what didn't work with me for this book is that things don't come together until the last chapter. They're two very distinctive narratives that don't touch each other until the very last chapter, and I was left wondering why. Why is it taking us so long for us to see how this story connects together? Where is she going with this? And then at the end I was like, what was the point of this story? It was very slow moving, it was very slow paced, and the ending just didn't hit. So I was wondering, what am I supposed to take away from having read this narrative? It also fell into the boat of where one of the narratives I enjoyed much more than the other. I felt like I didn't care about Eniola's schoolboy perspective, and in some ways that was the harder storyline to swallow. That should have hit emotionally more, but it just felt like I was being dragged through his everyday life with him when I just did not care. I did feel more invested in Wariola's storyline, but the struggle with that is I've read a lot of narratives about black women who are with no good men, and I think I've talked about this before, but I've just read so much of that on repeat lately that I am a bit exhausted by that narrative. And so that storyline also struggled with me being kind of done with reading about black women struggling with no good men. It didn't emotionally impact me. I don't think it's one I'm going to remember. While it did this setting very well and kind of touched on topics that are relevant and important in terms of enjoyment and like takeaway, it really didn't do anything for me. So this was just a middle of the road read. I feel like I put all of my black books first, so let's just go on to non-fiction here. And I read All About Love by Bell Hooks. Now I'd seen this one around a lot last year, where everybody was saying it kind of changed their life and changed and revolutionized their perspective on love, and that sounded fascinating to me, as well as me having heard about how good Bell Hooks' writing is. So I decided it was time that I read this non-fiction book where she analyzes and delves into the philosophy of love, self-love, and love in all its forms, in terms of raising a child love and sibling love and all the love that you can possibly think of. I just didn't feel intense love for this book. Unfortunately, I thought it was just okay. So what I think about this is that Bell Hooks does a very good job of delving into and unpicking the concept of love and trying to define it, and things that we kind of take for granted when we think about love and romance and self-love. She does a very good job of saying why we should not take those things for granted. But that also means that a lot of this stuff is stuff that I know, and I'm struggling to define whether it's stuff that I already know because I, like Bell Hooks, am a black Christian woman who therefore has grown up with a lot of the same values, and it may be revolutionary to somebody else to kind of think about these kind of things, or if it's just that it's quite simplistic in its nature and it's just that people haven't thought about love this way and I've spent more time thinking about love. So I'm not sure there, but what I will say is that there were two things that I particularly took away from this book. One is defining love as an action, and she will talk about that more in the book if you are curious about it, but I think that was a very interesting way to define love, and a way that made sense to me, even though I think there's some things that I would need to further investigate to kind of take that as the definition for myself. I did find that like a new and interesting concept that's been presented to me, and also it had some little tidbits here of ways in which I think I could do better with self-love and materialism and love in particularly. And I have been on the journey of like thinking about materialism and how I fall into that and how I play into that as a book consumerist myself. I can definitely identify myself that way. So thinking about love and materialism, and also a bit of the things that she talks about being a child and love and how to raise a child in love, really interested me. Those things happen at the beginning of the book. They're in the first 3 chapters. So after those first 3 chapters, I felt like I knew everything that was being discussed. I felt like none of my opinions were being challenged or changed, and that's when I kind of felt a bit more disconnected from the book. And I can see how other people would take value from it, but I didn't get enough value from it personally. I'm just a bit over and above this book's level. We'll also say that while Bell Hooks writes very clearly and explains everything in a very clear and easy to understand way, which makes it incredibly readable, I did read this very fast, I do think she also makes a lot of sweeping generalizations, and I think for talking about something like love, you do need to make those generalizations, so I understand. I just wish that she'd specified in the book more when she was making these sweeping generalizations to kind of not overlook the complexities and nuances that these conversations possess. Either which way, I feel like I need to read more philosophy on love, and I'd be curious to know if there are more books out there that can help me explore the topic further. This video has a young adult section because I've been reading young adult contemporary again. I've been in the mood for it. So the first one I read is The Do's and Donuts of Love by Adiba Jaigirdar, and this is a young adult book that's set in Ireland with an Irish Bangladeshi main character who is fat and who has anxiety, and she is entering into a baking competition, and in this baking competition, she will be going up against her ex-girlfriend who she is recently split with, and she also ends up forming a friendship with a new girl that might also turn into a romance. And in the baking competition, she is trying to win because her parents' donut shop is not doing so well, and the publicity that it could bring could be very, very good for them. I liked this. I had a good time. I love donuts. I've actually done a reading and eating vlog for this, which may or may not be up by the time that this video goes up. So if it is, I'll leave it linked everywhere that needs to be linked. I liked the donuts, the level of donuts, the inclusion of donuts, everything donutty was fantastic in this. And I think in terms of representation, as I know all of it is own voices to the author, I know that was all done very, very well. And I liked how it kind of touched on the racism that she received by being in this show and by being Bangladeshi Irish, because I think that's just such a unique blend of cultures that you don't get to hear that much about. So that was really fascinating. As a baking romance, as far as that goes, I kind of wanted more from it. I do think sometimes the baking element to this was like, I'm gonna make this and then boom, it's done, and this is why it turned out that way, rather than kind of taking us through the steps of the baking. And I know that might not be every baking romance's style, but when I read cooking romances or baking romances, I kind of like to learn about the processes or learn a bit more about the particular food that is being baked than you get in this one. It kind of breezes through the baking. It's almost like a game where you put the ingredients in the oven and you come out with something at the end and you learn what you've made. So I wanted a bit more from the baking element to this. In terms of the romance itself, it was really lovely. Everything unfolded exactly the way that I thought it was going to do. It was a bit of a love triangle situation, like should she get back with her ex or should she go with this new girl that she's met? And I think the cover, the UK finished cover, makes it quite obvious who is going to be chosen. So I'm not actually going to show you the finished cover in case you don't want to know. Because of the fact that the cover kind of makes it clear who is chosen, it made everything else in the book very predictable in terms of outcome, and it just made me wonder. I always struggle with love triangles if I don't understand the point of the love triangle, and if there's very much a clear outcome for the love triangle, that means there is no point to it. So for the romance, I was just drifting along, and it was nice, and it talked about how to develop deeper relationships and improve relationships that feel tricky at the root. And I think that's quite important to see in young adult, how you can not abandon a relationship but kind of dig deeper into it and see if you can fix things. I think I don't see that handled that much in young adult, so I like that aspect to it, but in some ways the romance also felt quite standard and predictable. So overall this was really sweet, it was really lovely. Even though it was a competition, it felt quite low stakes, and it felt like I just breezed through this book and I had a good time and I liked where it took me. I also liked the fact that she is a queer main character and she's closeted, and at the end of the book she's still closeted to the people that she's closeted to in the beginning, and while she's out to some people and closeted to others, and the happy ending isn't that she has to come out to people that she isn't ready to come out to, and that's what I liked about this book as well. Then I read Julieta and the Romeos by Maria E. Andreu, and this is a review copy, so I am going to show you the finished cover here. And this one is a young adult contemporary book where we're following this young Latin girl, and she is living in America, but she has an Argentinian restaurant with her parents, and it's just not doing so well post-pandemic. and at the same time she's pursuing her writing dreams by going to this writing school, when suddenly she has 3 possible Romeos in her life, 3 boys who are kind of all vying for her attention, and it's about who she wants to choose. She feels like she's slightly a different person with each one of them, so which kind of her does she want to be in the future? She's also got some stuff going on with her best friend and with her parents, and not knowing if they're in love, and if the deconstructing of the restaurant may be the deconstructing of their relationship. I read this one because it's called Julieta and the Romeos. And I saw the Romeo and Juliet connection. Even if it's tenuous, I was going to read this book. And in some ways, the Romeo and Juliet connection in this is quite thin. And in some ways, it being a Romeo and Juliet kind of inspired thing makes it very easy to tell which of the boys she is going to end up with. But you know what, I had a good time. I enjoyed the drama of seeing her unpick these relationships that she has with each of the boys and ultimately learn what she wants out of not only a relationship but out of herself. I liked how things played out in the end with a certain storyline, which is where she's co-editing this book that she writes online with an anonymous person, and she believes that anonymous person must be one of the boys, so which one is it? And I liked how that went. That was a bit of a you've got mail element to the story, and I liked that storyline even though I quickly figured out who it was. I also think it added a nice depth to the story, trying to talk without giving anything away. I learned a lot more about Argentinian culture. I haven't known that much about the cultural ins and outs, and so that was really nice. I also liked how involved the parents were in this one and the conversations that she had with her mum. I think they were really valuable. So this was just one of those books that I kind of cruised through and I had a good time with it. It's not going to be a long time, but it was fun and it was nice. And if you have a teenager who does enjoy reading like young adult romances, I think this could be a good one to introduce them to like new cultures, new phenomenons, while having a very good time with it as well. So I have a whole vlog with my thoughts and feelings on these two, but I did recently read Wolfsong and Ravensong by TJ Klune. These are the first 2 books in the Green Creek series. I read this one and I gave it 5 stars, and then I immediately read this one and I gave it 5 stars because these are the kind of books that took over my life. I was up at night at 1:30 a.m. reading during my work week because I could not chunk these 500+ page books down fast enough. So let's talk about them briefly, even though I have touched on them before. So for Wolfsong, this is about this boy, Ox, and he moves into a house with his mother, and his father leaves them, and new people move into the house down the lane. And they're very strange, and they're very protective, and they're very pack-like, and they may do things in a way that seems quite similar to werewolves. And I think that's all I'm going to really tell you, you know? In some ways you could call this a romantasy. The romance is heavy in this one and a big part of the story, but it doesn't take over the whole series. That's what I'll say about it. Ox is a lovely main character to follow. He's so sweet, he's so genuine, he doesn't talk much, and he just wants to be happy, and he wants his mother to be happy, and the pure motivations in him make him such a lovely main character to follow. You don't even understand. It's also kind of a sad boys in the woods and there's magic vibe, so Green Creek as a setting feels very small towny and feels like its own character, and I just loved these boys exploring the woods and just trying to heal themselves from some of their past trauma through finding each other and through forming a found family in this one. Also really loved, because I fell in love with a particular side character, that all of the side characters feel like main characters, and so you've got quite a big cast in general, but it never feels overwhelming and everybody is just included and counted into a found family or the other, because there's more than one found family at play here. The werewolf lore is done very, very well. You get to learn a lot about what these kind of werewolves are like and the politics that these alphas have to deal with, and at the end there is a genuine plot, and I quite liked how the plot came together, because first you're being like introduced to the characters and introduced to the world and they face their tensions, but a plot does come in and the plot does plot, you know, like the storyline was suspenseful, it was good, and I couldn't predict how things were going to happen at the end, and in some ways this book hurt me, but also in the very best way, in the way that you want from a fantasy book series. The writing style can sometimes feel a little bit repetitive. This is one that was indie published and then republished traditionally, but even though it was repetitive, you know, it was familiar. After the first 100 pages, it was familiar and comforting, so I got a nostalgia vibe even though I read this for the very first time this year, and it did make me laugh out loud. The banter is real, and I love the banter that the characters have, and the sad moments and the beautiful moments, and even though I read this for the first time this year, I've actually already reread this book. So that's how you can tell it is really new favourite material. Moving on, I then read Ravensong, and I really can't tell you much about this book because I don't want to give you any spoilers whatsoever. In this one, you're following a different couple within the pack, and this couple brings all of the slow burn angst that you could possibly want if you are an angsty lover like me. I also really like the character Gordon Livingstone, who you meet in the first book and who is across the series, and I really liked how he went about his own individual storyline in this book. I fell in love with him in Wolfsong, and then I loved him even more in this particular book. I really liked the couple. I think the other love interest could have had a bit more personality to him, but folks, I need to let you know, I've already reread this book since I first read it, and since rereading it, I take back what I said originally. I do think as a love interest, the character here is well developed, is very present, and it is very sweet. I didn't expect the plot to be the plot that it is in this. If you think there's plot in Wolfsong, this one is just like, yeah, we have a romance, but you know what I'm really gonna do? Give you an unexpected plot. I thought after the first book, I knew how this book series would go, and I would know who the villain was in this one, and I would know things, but I did not. It destroyed all of my expectations because stuff goes down, and I was here for it, and I was fangirling and having a fantastic time. It continued to bring Green Creek into the series. You learn more about other creatures beyond werewolves, and I quite liked that we get to learn about another type of creature in as much detail as we do, and I was just here for the romance, here for the characters. In terms of the found family, the first book does it very, very well, and the second book takes it to another level, a new height, and I was living for it. So yes, I read both of these books and then I reread them immediately because I was having such a jolly good time. And to end out this video, I'm going to finish by talking to you about a trilogy where I have read every single book in the trilogy within a week. It's Sarah Simone. She makes a return. So I read the Hope Trilogy, and these ones can be read as standalones that are kind of set in the same place. They don't connect in terms of timeline, which is what I expected, so it confused me a bit in the second book, but just be aware the timelines are all different, so even though they may be referring to dukes of certain buildings, they may not be the same duke as it was before because it'll be set in a different time period. The first book is called The Chasing of Eleanor Vance, and it's about Eleanor, who is betrothed to get married to this absolutely horrible man, and she goes to that place where she's supposed to get married and she meets his uncle, and she really likes the uncle, and so it's about how she ends up having a little rendezvous with the uncle instead, and she kind of discovers some things about her sexual prowess at the same time. And I thought this first book was just okay. I thought it was fine. It didn't rock my world. If you want to read something that is quite short, you can read this. You will have a good historical setting. You will have some fun, sexy times. If it took the storyline slower and we had more time with the characters, I think I could have really enjoyed this. But for what it was quite short, and it was over before it really started. So I thought it was okay, but nonetheless that didn't deter me, and I continued on to the second book, which is The Last Crimes of Peregrine Hind, and I gave this book 5 stars, and I really, really loved this one. And I think there's something about the way she starts a series that I usually feel mediocre about, and then the next one just really gets me going. And this one really got me going. So in this one, we follow a highwayman, and he wants to get revenge at this family, so he's tracking a carriage and he attacks it and he's ready to murder the person who's in it. However, it's not the family member that he wanted it to be, it's actually just somebody who's related to him. I think it's the son or like the cousin. I can't exactly remember, but it's someone who's related to the person he wants to get revenge on but is not quite that person. And so when he's ready to kill him, the man, Sandy, says, "It'd be so much better for you if you took me in as a captive and kept me alive, because then you could ransom me and get the person you want to kill nearby you." And he's basically just prattling off so that he can save his own life. So this highwayman takes him as a captive, and yeah, things go down. The highwayman and his captive. Whew! I really liked this book. This one has a touch more of the light, I would say the very light BDSM elements to it. So if you want something that's very, very light end on the BDSM, please, I cannot stress to you, it's quite light, then this will be a book for you. In this one, there are more steamy scenes than the first one. I think it's also longer because there are multiple steamy scenes and every single one is really, really good, and it has a bit more of a burn and a build up to their connection. And I did like the roles of like the captor and the captive. It was all played so well. It did the historical vibes very, very well, and I just really loved our grumpy, stoic highwayman who just slowly unravels. And the fact that even though they're having these moments together, he's still very much trying to escape, and he still very much is worried that at the end of all of this, Peregrine is going to kill him. So it's interesting to see kind of how that dynamic flips. Sandy himself, the captive, is just so cheeky. I loved him. He was so humorous and cheeky, and he was really bold and willing to say what he wanted and get what he wanted. So it was a really good book, and I have to say, since reading this one, I have read it 3 times in the space of 3 weeks. I've been reading it every single week, and I don't know when I'm gonna stop, but I have to say it's really, really good, and it's up there with my favorites of Sarah Simone's books. And then last but not least, to round out the trilogy, I read The Conquering of Tate the Pious by Sarah Simone. Oh, I should mention, the first one is male-female, the second one is male-male, and this one here is female-female. It's about 2 women together, and it's about a nun who is a nun to this cathedral, and she harbours the secrets of this cathedral, and she is being attacked by this well-known, mysterious, bad person who seems to be pillaging across the whole lands and is finally at her cathedral's gate. And so she goes to meet with this person and try and negotiate, when she discovers that it's not actually a man who is the one who's got the whole country in a stir, it is actually a woman. She kind of makes a deal where she'll spend 3 nights in this woman's bed as long as the woman goes away at the end if she doesn't discover the secret that she's come here to pillage. So what I really liked about this one is that there's a lot more roleplay in this, and I don't think I've read that many roleplay romance books that have done it for me, that have ticked the boxes. But for some strange reason, I really, really liked this, and I thought all of the steamy scenes were very, very good. And again, it was longer than the first one was, so there was more time for them to build up that connection for me to believe it. And even though they get hot and heavy very quickly, you can see how their kind of connection bonds and builds up as they role play more and more and the lines start to blur. And I thought that was really fun and an interesting dynamic to read about and enjoy. But because I like the dynamic of captor and captive so much in the second book, it made sense that I like the dynamic of like pillager and protector of the cathedral. So that's all I really have to say about those. They're very quick reads and they're really enjoyable. There is one thing I want to warn you about though, and this is what a lot of readers have contention with this series for, but it didn't bother me in the slightest. But that's because in these books, in the background, you always hear about a secret kingdom, like a secret steamy kingdom. I'm trying to avoid a word here to not get demonetized, where lots of things go on and it's all deeply BDSM and deeply polyamorous, and you know that this kingdom exists in this historical world, but you never get to see it firsthand. And I just want to stress, you'll never get to see it firsthand. So if that's something you're reading this series and holding out hope for, you are going to be disappointed. But if you're here just to see these 2 couples or the 3 couples kind of forge their own way together, then that's what you're going to get. But there you have it. Those are 10 books that I've recently read. Please let me know down below, what was the last book that you recently read? Have you read any of these and what did you think of them? Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Hit that subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't forget to hit that notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video. And you know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior!